I've developed a relationship with that land. And so when people hike once and then they hike twice and maybe hike the Northfield Placid Trail, okay, I'm going to climb these mountains over here. They develop that appreciation and love. And now they just naturally, almost unconsciously, they just become stewards of the land. Now, some people also say, and it's true to a certain extent, but the way they word it, it's not completely honest, is they'll say, well, when you have a lot of people hiking in the woods, you have a lot more problems. And again, I said, well, what's a lot? And so there have been some narratives put out there, these kind of Chicken Little narratives. Oh my God, the sky is falling. But there's really not a lot of problems in the high peaks. So, for example, I spoke to somebody recently who was hiking in the Adirondacks, and with an exasperated tone, they said, oh, there are more searches and rescues now that everybody's hiking up there. And of course, my response was, what is more? Yeah, you throw me a bone here. You just can't say more. I don't understand what that means. And I have the numbers in front of me. Between 2017 and 2018, there was one more rescue. It went from 345 to 346. Now, is that more? It is more. But when people just kind of throw out these vague terms again, more, overuse, increase, you need to give me some specific numbers, and then I can deduce for myself if I think it's statistically significant.
Numbers do not lie. That is absolutely the case. It actually kind of reflects everyday life at this point in our country and in the world right now too. Yeah, that's these vague terms that are just. That's kind of the point of this whole episode, is just always hearing these vague terms that don't seem to have any oomph behind them, or any sort of okay, well, the next question is, there's no answer to it. So I kind of find that being the case tremendously. So let's even talk about search and rescues real quick. You've been a ranger before in your life. So what are ways that people can avoid the need for search and rescue? Just give a little bit of advice for people as ways that they can perhaps get themselves out of a situation that maybe they've got themselves into, or stop and breathe and take a second. How can we try to limit the amount of search and rescues?
Right. It's some pretty basic stuff. And just to back up for a second, we just mentioned that there were about 350 searches and rescues and body recoveries average year in the Adirondack Park, and it went up by one. Okay, I'll give you that. It is more. Technically, it is more. But again, it's still a really low number. For example, in an average year, 35,000 people hike Cascade Mountain. One mountain, 35,000 people. Park-wide, 350 rescues, recoveries, and searches. So again, we're doing really well. If you do the math and come up with a percentage, it's going to be a whole lot of zeros and then a number.
Sure.
And the number is probably going to be one. Right?
That's a very good point.
There's no crisis going on here. Just everybody calm down, take a breath, just take it easy. Everything's okay. Now, with that said, searches and rescues, a lot of them, almost all of them, I would say, it's just a guess, but it's a pretty good guess. I would say just about all of them are preventable. They're preventable. Now, it would be interesting to do a study on this. I don't know much about it, but I'm under the impression that people taking their smartphone into the woods gives them a false sense of security. And so what they'll say is, I can kind of plan this trip half-assed, and if I get into trouble, I'll just call somebody. I mean, I'm under the impression it's not most, but I think that's not uncommon. And what people need to realize is, one, the chances of the phone working are pretty slim in a lot of parts of the Adirondacks. But it seems like me a breach in ethics and responsibility just to say, well, I'll plan the hike as if I cannot get assistance, rather than saying, well, I can always just rely on my phone. I'll just call for help. And what's really interesting with these search numbers and the rescue numbers, it went up by one, but actually the amount of it's a strong word, but kind of the amount of recklessness may actually be low. The number may have gone up just because more people call quicker now, or there's more cell phone service. So there are all these factors that people don't take into consideration. They say, oh, there's more searches and rescues. It's like, well, maybe just people call more. Maybe people get reception now. It could be a totally innocent reason. So when people say things to me, and this is probably why I'm a therapist, anytime anybody says a fact to me and my eyebrows kind of raise, my first question is, why? Like, why would that be? And a lot of times when you ask the why and research it, it's not a problem. It's just a natural increase due to innocent reasons. All right. So to finally get around to answering your question, I would say that people cannot rely on a smartphone. All right. Just plan your own hike, do it thoroughly. If you don't know what you're doing, go with somebody that you know. And we've all kind of started out like this. Like, I'm pretty surprised I'm not dead, because when I started backpacking and hiking, I had no clue what I was doing. I was bringing the wrong gear. I'm wearing a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt in the winter, and I'm post holing. And I was a total, as they say in the military, I was a soup sandwich. I was just a wreck, a mess, had no clue what I was doing. And then you learn over the years. And so you have sometimes could be a deadly combination of ignorance, which is fine. I'm not saying you're dumb. You just don't know. And then on top of that, they think that if they bring some form of communication with them, they're going to be immediately rescued, and it's not really a hassle for the people rescuing them.
Yeah, that lays it out. That lays it out really well. And I do think that's got to be a huge. It's actually something I never even really thought about. The fact that it's so much easier to call for a search and rescue at this point than it would have been 20 years ago. That's something that didn't even really cross my mind, because obviously cell phones are so engraved in our society, in our brains now, that fact is easily able to be forgotten about.
Right. Because maybe 10 years ago, there were way more calls made, but they just didn't get reception.
Sure. Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, you always have to ask about the why. Like, how did we get to this point? Like, why is this a thing? And this came up when I was getting, not to go too off topic, when I was getting my master's in clinical social work to be a therapist. I did a paper and a presentation about the increase in children having conditions that were diagnosed as bipolar. And there were people freaking out in my class saying, did you know that the amount of diagnoses offered to children for bipolar has doubled in the last few years? Well, one, it went from like 3 to 6. So did it double? Yes. But come on. I mean, it's not a big deal. When you say it doubles, it sounds like a lot. But what it turned out to be, why there were more diagnoses offered, is one, diagnosing is much more, it's quicker and more accurate and easier these days. And so there may have been more children with bipolar in the past, but we just didn't know how to diagnose the condition. The other thing to take in consideration is you have these helicopter parents now, and they were coming into offices and demanding that the practitioner offer a diagnosis. So when you say the why and how did we get here, in the end, probably fewer children have that mental illness.
Yeah, the whys are so important to really get to the meat of the issue, no matter what it is. Amazing. Sure. So we've got some pretty heavy conversation here. So let's lighten it up for just a quick second. So you created the Trans ADK route, which we know, and I've done an episode on, and we talked about it last time. Did you have any finishers this season?
It was a banner year. So typically, the route opened for business in 2013. We were typically getting about 3 a year, and this year we got 10, which was great. And a lot of it stemmed from, this is, talking about rules and permits and stuff. This is very interesting, and maybe not a lot of people know this. It's kind of really weird. So we have this whole COVID-19 thing, and people were being discouraged from traveling. Well, a lot of people were planning on hiking the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, etc. And some of these trail clubs, in my opinion, became bullies. So I'll give you an example with the Appalachian Trail and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Man, at least they're transparent. I'll give them that. They came out and they said, hey, if you hike the Appalachian Trail this year, we're not recognizing your accomplishment.
Sounds like what the Northville Placid Trail did too.
Yes, Northville Placid. Thank you very much. Yeah, Northville Placid Trail did too. And I was like, excuse me. I was just like, who the hell are you? Like, what? They hiked it. You can't deny that they hiked it. So I let people know. I said, hey, look, if you want to hike the Trans Adirondack route, I'm not going to go around saying that you never hiked it. I mean, that's really not fair. So we had about 10 people. A couple were planning on hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. A couple were going to do the AT. And they were just getting into these conflicts with these trail clubs. You know, they would say, hey, can I order a map set? And they basically came back with, yeah, but you're an irresponsible jerk.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, sure.
I was like, this is ridiculous. So, hey, look, you want to hike the Trans Adirondack route, go ahead. So this year we've had 10 completers, and then we had another 4, maybe 5 people attempt it, but did not finish.
Got it. Cool. I love to hear that myself. I run the Lake Placid Niner Challenge, and I had plenty of people message me telling me, not even just asking, but telling me, hey, you need to shut this down. You need to close it. And I was just like, I can't, because I don't. If they hike it, they hike it. And some people, we're supposed to stay local. So I didn't really push it or promote it. But I could tell you, I had so many finishers in the spring and the early summer, and I'm telling you, everybody was from within an hour and a half drive from these mountains. And for me, I'm just like, personally, I just feel like there is no better way to deal with what we're dealing with than to retreat to the woods. And I mean, let's be honest, we're adults. We can easily, if you want to do the social distancing thing and that whole, all that stuff, you want to wear a mask, whatever you want to do whatever you want. But it's so easy to do that out in the woods. It's not like you're crowded with people. You're on a trail in the woods. I think there's been no better thing for a person to do. So I couldn't shut it down. I didn't shut it down. And, I kind of went with how I feel on the subject, which is exactly how you did with the Trans ADK route. And I was quite off put by the various places doing. I mean, there's no other way to say it than what you did. It is them bullying by saying we won't recognize it. It's like, we'll get them here. We'll just tell them this doesn't count, and that'll discourage them from going. Well, no, it doesn't discourage anyone from going, because people still went. It just makes you look like a jerk, quite frankly, in my opinion, anyways, which is meaningless, but that's my opinion on the subject.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I said, I think somebody told me at first. I was like, I said, look, you must be mistaken. I mean, if you hike it, they're not going to go around saying you didn't hike it. But, I went online, did a little research, and that was the case. And you're absolutely right. And I look at this from a guy who hikes a lot, but also a therapist, is the best place to be, like spiritually, physically, emotionally, when it comes to actual physical safety of not getting the virus and not giving it to somebody else, is to be outside. So when it came to like the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, I was kind of like, how does this work? So I can't hike in the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, but I can go to Walmart, because that's what I'll be doing if I'm not hiking. Like, how does this logic work? I'm not following you.
Yeah, and that is why it just does not make sense to me, and did not make sense to me, and still doesn't make any sense to me, that whole subject. So going with, as we start to wrap up the show here real quick, you're a big outdoors guy. I mean, not only have you, bushwhacked all over the Northeast, but you've done tons of long distance hiking, you've done long distance mountain biking and paddling as well. What is your favorite outdoors activity? Like, if you could only do one thing, what's your favorite outdoors activity, and what is your favorite adventure you've done? And list off a few of the various things you've done on a mountain bike and paddling, because it is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so I do a lot of different sports, which is kind of rare. You know, you meet people who peak bag a lot or long distance hike a lot.